to the BizBlend podcast, listeners, where business meets strategy, leadership, and sustainability. I'm your host, Sana, as always, and today in this episode, we are having a conversation many founders need, but few are really having. Let me ask you this question: how do you stop holding it all and instead build a business that actually holds you? Well, my guest today is Edi Oduraa, and let me share a bit about her with all of you listeners. She's a civil engineer turned growth architect and the founder of House of Oduraa. Since 2019, Edi has been the unseen architect behind launches that feel spacious, operations that honor the soul of the work, and systems that scale without sacrificing the founder. So, if you have ever felt like you are trapped or you're stuck, you are frustrated with the weight of your own success, or you are actually internally ready to build something that doesn't burn you out, this episode is for you. So, with that, Eddie, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really excited to have you here with all of us.
Thank you so much, Sana, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, Eddie, lots of figurative words in there. Launches that feel spacious, operations that honor the soul of the work. It's like two different worlds are intersecting here. So you use the phrase sacred infrastructure when talking about building systems in a business. I am really, really curious. What exactly does it look like? I mean, is it like a mindset or is it a structure? Or is it something else entirely?
Yes, yes. Thank you for asking that question. Absolutely. One of my favorite things is to blend two dissimilar things in a way that works really well. But when I talk about sacred structure and spacious launches, what I am talking about is very practical, technical things like processes, SOPs, technology, but building it in such a way that it is heart centered and it's aligned with the founder and the team. And so, what that looks like is traditionally when you think of systems and processes and optimization and scaling, it sounds very rigid. I'm sure, like, even just hearing me say that, you sit up straighter um, and we imagine, a prescribed way of doing things and coming in and changing everything. And this is the way it's done, right? But what I really champion for in my own business and in my clients' businesses is creating structure that, like you mentioned, allows you to grow without holding it all. But also doesn't sacrifice your unique gifts and talents and your unique rhythms. And so, um, for many founders that I work with, this looks like auditing not just where the bottlenecks are operationally, in terms of their system and their efficiency, but even auditing their own energy and their goals and the way they work best, and what are the visions and the goals that you're holding in your
Mhm.
heart and really accessing those and starting from that place of understanding the people within the organization and then from that place, constructing the systems that feel good. It matters that the technology and the processes you select feel good because the best kind of technology is a technology that's used, right? And so it can be beautiful, it could be elaborate, but if everybody hates getting into it and using it and utilizing it, it's not as effective. So that's in part what I mean when I talk about sacred and spacious and intuitive as it comes to systems and processes.
Wow. And I have heard founders struggle to reconcile spiritual and strategy because sometimes the context in which they are approaching both of these worlds, they can be really, really different. So I would love to hear, Eddie, how you bridge that gap for them.
Absolutely. Yes. Um, this is really the secret sauce, I think, to growing a business that um, feels good and is aligned and you can be proud of, and it's not burning you out. At the heart of it is bringing your whole self. And this is a very multi-layered conversation, but I think in the modern world, we often compartmentalize different aspects of ourselves, our emotional self, and then we have our business self, right? And we have our spiritual self. And so bringing merging those looks like, um while you have a cerebral approach to strategy, you look at the metrics. We don't ignore that,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But then you bring in your intuition to say, "Okay, I know I wanna head in this general direction, but what feels aligned? What is, my higher sensibility telling me? What is the wisdom of the other team members or my board of advisors also directing me with?"
Mhm.
And it
Mhm.
it even looks like, on a granular level, for me, I like to have kinda like rituals around my workday to help me start and close, and I know that became a bigger thing with COVID when many of us were working at home.
Yeah.
But my work startup ritual, for many people, it looks like, okay, I open my inbox, I see who messaged me, I react to that, I plan my
Yeah.
day around what people want, right? But for me, it looks like, even saying a short invocation and visualizing my goals achieved and welcoming in, um, just wisdom and the wisdom of, my spirit team, and then doing some of the more tactical things, like perhaps answering the emails or looking at my calendar. And so in these ways, we're merging, bringing all parts of ourselves. And when we do that, everything is just so much more potent.
Hmm. That is true. That's true. And this happens so many times, especially right now when we are as a founder entrepreneur. Let's say I have decided a week back or maybe a few days back that okay, I'm keeping these 2 days entirely to plan or to complete these two tasks to achieve these two goals.
Yeah.
But when we get into that zone, we start with our 2 days of focused work. There are so many distractions as well coming up there. And it's kind of, it looks like everything is derailing what I'm doing. And that kind of creates that frustration within us. I haven't done my work, nothing is done. I'm exactly at the same point. I'm back to square one. So it really, really, you know, discourages our spirit. So,
Yeah.
how do we tackle those situations, Eddie? How do we navigate through those situations, where we can kind of get into that rabbit hole of feeling bad for ourselves or, judging the way we work as a founder, as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's multiple pieces of ourselves that we need to attend to in situations like this. And
Mhm.
so the immediate one is well, there is an element of mindset work, right?
Mhm.
And self-acceptance, etc. And I think there's a very practical piece of uh recognizing if something doesn't work for us. Like even, the example of blocking off 2 days to really be heads down and dive into these things. Um,
Mhm.
I think what can be both the emotional elements of giving ourselves, that acceptance and that compassion, it can be further helpful to actually take action to support
Mhm.
ourselves, right? It's kinda like, when we say to somebody, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened," but we leave it at that. But then taking it
Yeah.
the next step to actually provide tactical support. So what that might look like is, "Hey, I this is the model I've seen for getting work done. You block off all this time and you do this
Mhm.
task, right? But instead of subjecting myself to what, and I'm doing air quotes, should happen, let me look at what actually works for me. And let
Mhm.
me, instead of focusing my emotional energy on making myself feel better that I don't fit this mold, let me create my mold. Use that emotional energy to unwind from narratives that say that I have to do it this way. And so maybe I do better with, 30-minute spurts of work, and I
Mhm.
block off 2 hours, but every day that week instead, and I do 30-minute spurts, and that works for me, and I don't judge that. And maybe I work better at 4 in the morning, and so I block off that time. And so I think when we're hitting frustration, um, there's certain things in life that we just have to do, right, and get through. But when we continue to hit a wall,
Mhm.
especially around working and focus and energy, it's time to really take that energy that we're expending beating ourselves up and put it towards assessing ourselves and making peace with how we're wired and setting up our lives in such a way that we complement that. And that's really what, the heart of what we're talking about is that acceptance and building a life and business that works for us and not against us.
That definitely makes sense, Eddie. Okay, and this is coming from what certain observations I had. So uh, startups they want better systems.
Yeah.
They want to streamline their operations by putting up automations or maybe better checks and balances. But often it's not really a systems problem. I believe it's a leadership or even a nervous system issue. If we look at that from a different perspective, look at that from a kind of a body, physical body perspective. So, how do you help your clients figure out whether it's the back end that's broken or it is them over functioning?
Right. Yeah. Such a great question and so true, right? Because the actions we take are a reflection of our inner world. Um,
Mhm.
Pretty much 100%, right? And doing some of these things that you mentioned can be a cover up for the true underlying issues. And so, yeah, that's why for me, every engagement starts with deep conversation around the goals, the visions, what support is in place internally, what are the internal narratives around growth, around ease, around success. So many of us have been programmed by society to
Mhm.
believe that suffering for success is noble and really the only path, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and that's the bigger the burden we bear, the more we are justified in having what we have. And so, so often the work that is the work that needs to be done, to move the needle forward is to, unwind these narratives around hustle and to allow the and to let the nervous system feel safe receiving without
Mhm.
strife. I know for me, my hardest transitions have been when I'm stepping into the next level of business or life, and there's not struggle, my body is well equipped to work late nights and, sacrifice my health
Mhm.
to achieve the next level, right? But, for many of us, what we're wanting to build and grow, especially your listeners being, more of those heart-centered people, we mentally say we don't wanna sacrifice these things, right? But our nervous system and our body and our programming often is at war with that, and so, I think the biggest thing, to do is to have these conversations with someone or with ourselves to really assess like what are the narratives I've received around like growth and struggle, etc. What did my parents show me? What's the example I learned there? What do we see in media? And does this align with where I want to go? How could believing this, if I believe it, how could it prevent me from seeing opportunities to grow with ease and to grow, soulfully? And when we begin to have those conversations, it's beautiful how, oftentimes we don't need as much automation and technology and software as we realize, right? A lot of times we're covering up. We're just over functioning in creating all these systems and automations when really, we need to streamline our offers. We need to simplify what we're doing, and so that's what I've recognized in myself and in the people I've served over the years.
That is really great. That is really, really great and really insightful because early on, when we started our journey with Healthy Mind Magic, we always kept tweaking our tools when really it was kind of needed to tweak our roles, our mindset, our thought process. So that's really insightful, Eddie. And as a former civil engineer, uh,
Mhm.
I get that you are no stranger to structure and precision. So, how do you balance the rigidity of engineering frameworks with the more fluid, creative demands of visionary businesses? I mean, isn't there a risk that too much systemization, too much rigidity, it can stifle innovation?
Yes, absolutely. There's a quote in the design world, and I don't remember who said it, but
Mhm.
along the lines of the best designs have the fewest elements possible. Um, and I think in fashion, they say, put on all the accessories you want and then remove 1 or 2 or something like that. And there is something to be said for maximalist fashion. I do love a good maximalist painting, but I
Mhm.
do think the principle applies here. And that's kind of a guiding principle for me, and I think that is helpful to hold, is that uh, um, get as specific as possible and not an inch more. Get as systemized as necessary and not an inch more. So I think the risk for a lot of the temptation for a lot of businesses is to dive straight into having written SOPs for everything. You timing like when you do timesheets, have every single task be accounted for. And when we do that, we over constrain the equation. We over restrain our workforce, our creativity. And so the approach I take is much more like bottoms up as opposed to top down in the sense of we start with the minimum viable product, how much systemization, what is it, the little 20%, like, the Pareto principle, 20% of the work makes 80% of the results. What are the 20% tweaks that we can make that will bring about 80% more ease, more income, more impact? And let's stop there and let's see how the system runs. Let's see what is not working, what does work, what is over constrained, what is too fluid, and then go from there, and so it's a much more organic, and it feels more like almost like nature-based approach, where we're not rushing to the end. We see how it grows and how it shifts and changes, and we work with it, and we're not so frightened. We're not so um,
Overwhelmed?
say again.
Overwhelmed?
Yeah, exactly. Like, we're not so threatened by this overwhelm and current state that we're wanting to rush to the end where everything is fixed and systems are a silver bullet because, there is no silver bullet, and so this process requires sitting in a bit more discomfort, the discomfort of experimentation and play, which we don't necessarily like, right? We want to get to the end. We want the clarity immediately, but doing it in this way, again, like in nature, allows it to grow organically, allows the tree to flourish truly, as it's meant to be without us hacking away at it and constraining this and doing that. And so I think really holding in mind the idea that, we wanna systemize as just as much as we need to move, the needle, but not a drop more, and then go from there.
Wow. I really love that. Yeah, really love that. And yeah, I believe in simplicity, not overcomplicating things because I don't know, I cannot structure, I cannot function like that when, things are overcomplicated, kind of, completely hinders my creativity. And I that's why I absolutely resonate with what you said. And Eddie, before we wrap up, at what point in a founder's journey do you think that infrastructure starts holding the founder instead of
Mm.
the founder holding the business? Just to kind of give a heads up to the founder that okay, maybe these are some of the red flags that the infrastructure is holding me. I mean, is there a milestone or a mindset shift that has to be taken, or does it need any intentional design from day one itself?
Yeah. Um, I will say, so the answer is a little bit different depending on somebody's leaning. Um, so for the person who is, um a little bit less visionary. They're doing what they love, they wanna build a business, but they're a little bit less of risk takers, they don't move as fast. I found the
Okay.
temptation often to over systemize too soon, to try to
Okay.
automate, try to onboard software, and so to that person, I would say, um it's okay for inefficiency to be present as you start your journey. When you start reaching the point where you have, sustainable income, where now you're more concerned about finding the time to serve your clients than like where your clients are coming from, that's when to begin to look at your systems more. When you're at the point where you're gonna start considering hiring your first VA, and things of that nature when you're getting to that point where your capacity is getting maxed out. That's when I think it's great to start looking at how can the business hold me instead of me spinning all the plates. And so to the other kind of entrepreneur who's more visionary, more breakneck speed. they tend to wait too long to, get systemization in place and get structure in place. To them, I would say from the jump at the beginning, start thinking about as you think about your lofty, beautiful goals, think about what kind of support you would need to get there so that you don't get there burned out, wrecked, nervous system shot. And even if you don't implement those things now, have a mind as you're doing your work to say, okay, I'm doing this now, but at some point, I'd want somebody else to take care of this. And you can even have a running list, of things that, okay, this does not spark joy. This is not my zone of genius. Keep a running list so that when the time comes, when you reach that same point, really, when now your biggest focus is serving clients less than finding clients, you now can say, okay, this is what I need to automate. This is what I need to get support for, etc.
Thoughtful. It's really thoughtful, Eddie. Ah, so Eddie, before we conclude, so if our listeners would like to connect with you and explore more about your insights and the resources that you're providing, and also about House of Oduraa, what's the best way to do that?
Yes, the best place to do that is on my website, edithoduraa.me, and my newsletter. I'm sure will include a link. Right now, that is the main place that I am showing up, as well as Pinterest, which links back to my newsletter, my blog posts. But those would be the best places to find me.
Brilliant. I'll make sure to have all the links included in the show notes. And Eddie, I cannot thank you enough for breaking this down with such clarity and depth because for I believe that for every founder who is listening or who is going to listen to our conversation and they're tired of holding it all together, they don't have to. So there is definitely a way to grow their business in a way that holds them, honors their vision, and sustains their energy as well. So thank you so much for helping us with all your insights.
Thank you so much, Sana, for having me. It was a beautiful conversation. I appreciate it.
And to all the listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of BizBlend. I'll be having all the links to connect with Eddie and her programs, her resources, her work. Just refer to the show notes along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, keep blending strategy with soul and business with balance. Thank you.